Scout organizations exist to teach children respect and appreciation for nature, survival skills, and excellent character. But sometimes these scout kids will learn true terror when the forces of nature and whatever lies beyond nature decide to scar them for life. Don't turn your back on the woods because the trees are always watching. Enjoy these allegedly true and scary stories about Boy and Girl Scouts. Now let's begin. I've gone on tons of Boy Scout camping trips in my time as a scout, but this may have been by far the scariest. Our troop decided to take a trip to Carlsbad to camp out and visit the famous caverns near our campsite. One of the kids in my troop, named Kyle, was excited to visit Carlsbad because his uncle lived in the area and he was coming to visit our troop on the last day of camping. We drove up on Friday night and set up camp. The next day, we would go down to visit the caverns. You see, all of troop camping trips begin with us driving up on Friday, doing stuff in the area on Saturday, and then driving home on Sunday. So on Saturday, we all woke up excited for an adventure in the caverns. We woke up early and hiked out to the caverns. Once we arrived at the visitor center, me, Kyle, and a few other boys entered an elevator to be lowered into the caverns. Inside of the elevator, I heard laughter. Specifically, the laughter of a little girl. Confused, I started looking around, but there were only guys in the elevator. I looked over to see Kyle looking around. I thought nothing of it, but now it occurs to me that he had heard it too. Other than that, the other guys didn't look fazed, so I decided that I had heard something else and quickly moved on. We got into the caverns, and they were honestly really cool. Well, they were cool until we got into the large chamber, at least. We entered the large chamber, and Kyle and I were hanging behind. Suddenly, I began hearing the laughter again. As I said before, this was an all-boys trip. I was scared at this point, so I asked Kyle, "Hey man, do you hear that?" "The laughter?" he asked. "Yeah, I hear it. It's creeping me out." "All right, everyone, I'm going to turn out the lights for no longer than 30 seconds, because this young man asked." We both focused our attention on the kid that had suggested the idea and glared. He seemed confused, so he ducked away. We saw the lady walk away, and then seconds later, the lights shut off. It was dark in that cavern. I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. I knew something was wrong. Suddenly, cold ran over me. I felt a tug on my shirt. "Kyle, is that you?" I asked. "Yeah," he replied. "Why are you grabbing me?" I asked, confused. "Look," he muttered. I looked over in the darkness, expecting to see nothing, but that's not at all what I saw. It was a little girl. The only problem was she was disfigured. Her body looked like it had been smashed in. On top of that, she was glowing and floating. She began laughing suddenly, and it was the same laugh that had been torturing me this entire time. And then she spoke. "He's going to die." She sang, looking at Kyle. "He's going to die." She sang again, almost taunting him. Finally, one last time she sang while screaming as loud as she could, "He's going to die." Then the lights flicked back on, and she was gone. Kyle and I did not speak for the rest of the tour. Though at the end of the tour, the lady started mentioning ghosts in the caverns. One ghost that caught my attention was the ghost of a little girl who died in a car crash and haunts the region. I started wondering if this was the girl we saw. I got back to camp late, and needless to say, I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Kyle's tent buddy walked up to me and asked if I'd seen Kyle. I replied with a no. He told me that when he woke up this morning, all the stuff in Kyle's tent was gone. I told him that I'd noticed that Kyle's dad's car was missing from the campsite. Kyle's dad was an assistant scoutmaster at the time. We brought it up to a scoutmaster, and he told us that Kyle left last night for a personal reason. I shrugged it off, and we drove back that day. On the way back, we drove by a casino. There were cop cars and ambulances surrounding it, and I noticed a badly crashed car being dismantled. And then, two faces caught my eye. They belonged to Kyle and his father. They were kneeling down and crying beside what looked to be a corpse with a white sheet over it. Then I put two and two together. That corpse belonged to Kyle's uncle. He had died in a car crash in the night when he was coming to visit Kyle. One thing about this story confuses me, though. Did the girl come to warn Kyle that his uncle would die, or did she kill him? Story number 2. When I was a teenager, I spent every summer at a girls' camp. For a number of those years, the organization I went with picked this campsite that was infested with critters. My dad was a scoutmaster, so I've done enough camping to know that I normally didn't encounter as many critters as I did at this place. And every year I always came away with an interesting encounter story to tell my friends and family. During my junior year, our assigned group was given a campground on the very far end of the massive campground. It made getting to and from the mess hall really annoying, especially in the morning when we had to be up and at breakfast at 7 a.m. Every day as we walked up the grassy path to the mess hall, huge swarms of grasshoppers would flee ahead of our footsteps. I was pretty sure there were snakes in the grass too, since we'd found snakes in the area before. So I was always telling the other girls with me to watch their step. The day before our particular encounter, we had an activity out in this big meadow at the very front of the camp. It was the only time we'd ever used that meadow, and being the curious person I was and still am, I spent my time paying less attention to whatever we were doing and more on my surroundings. The field had long, tall grass up to my waist in some areas, and it was completely surrounded by woods and unused campgrounds. There were no human fixtures set up in the field, so no lighting, no sound systems, nothing. Later that night, while we were sitting at the campground enjoying the fire, one of our camp counselors approached me and a few other older girls. "Hey, Melissa needs to take her nightly medication. Can you take her up to the nurse's office to get it?" Melissa was one of the first years, and it was camp policy that we not go up to the nurse's office alone at night. This was because it was up by the mess hall, which was by the beginning of the entire camp, and there was no one else in that area at night except the on-duty nurse. Therefore, it gets extremely dark up there at night. "Yeah, sure, no problem," I said, grabbing my flashlight. I asked Jessica, one of the other girls my age, to come with us, and all three of us went. We headed up the road, heading towards the grassy path that would take us directly up to the nurse's station. On the way, we passed multiple campgrounds full of other people. With the light of fires, pavilions, and our flashlights, it was well lit most of the way. But by the time we got to the grassy path that would take us to where we needed to go, it was pitch dark again. We stopped at the foot of the path, shining our lights in the tall grass. "You know, this path kind of looks creepy at night," Melissa pointed out, coming closer to my side as though I could somehow protect her. I remembered all the creepy animals I'd seen in the grass that surrounded the path, and I did not like the idea of stepping on something and getting attacked. After all, I'd had enough animal experiences at this campground to be worried. So I replied, "Yeah, there might be an animal or something in that grass. I'd rather not get bitten tonight. Maybe we should just follow the road." The road was definitely the long way around. There were no other campers camping next to the road, so it would be pretty dark. But at least the path would be clear for us to see anything in our flashlights. At least, that was my reasoning. And perhaps it was because I was older, perhaps it was because I had camping experience, or perhaps I just sounded like I knew what I was doing. But Melissa and Jessica both agreed to my plan. I wish they hadn't listened to me. We didn't know it yet, but I had made an incredibly stupid mistake. We headed down the path. At first, it wasn't too bad. We could still hear people behind us talking and laughing and singing camp songs. But the longer we walked, the darker it became. Even the light from our flashlight seemed to grow dim, as if the night were trying to swallow it up. It was as we grew closer to the bend in the road that we all started to feel a growing dread. We had passed the last empty campsite, and though we could now see the nurse's station lights up at the top of the hill, down at the bottom where we were, we felt as if the darkness had wrapped us in its arms, beckoning us off the road, where it would lead us into the meadow from earlier in the day. "I don't like this," Jessica said. "Somehow that meadow feels way creepier in the dark than it did in the morning." "Do you think there's dangerous animals down there?" Melissa whispered. "The worst we'd run into is coyotes, and unless we have a small dog with us, they're not going to want to come near us." I tried to reassure them. "We're almost there anyway." "Yeah, but then we got to go back," Jessica pointed out. Though I didn't admit it, she had a point. I wasn't looking forward to the return journey. We got Melissa to the nurse's station without further incident. When we explained the creepy feeling we got down by the meadow to the nurse, she gave us a funny look and asked, "Why didn't you just use the shortcut?" "Because there's animals that bite in that grass." "I don't want to get bitten," I explained. The nurse shrugged. Then once Melissa finished, she sent us back on our way. For a moment, as we faced the road back towards the meadow, we hesitated. "Are you sure we should go this way?" Melissa asked. "Do you want to get bitten?" Jessica countered. And that was it. We linked arms as though that would give us more protection against whatever was out there, and we headed down the path. It seemed to get darker a lot quicker heading down the hill towards the meadow than walking away from it. With it, that foreboding feeling grew stronger, until we were moving so slowly we were inching forward. "Something's not right," I finally whispered. "Maybe we should turn around and take our chances with the other path," Melissa suggested. There was sheer terror in her voice. "If something truly is out here with us," I pointed out, "I'm not sure showing it our backs is the best idea." "Well, if it's an animal, we should make noise to scare it away. Let's sing some camp songs. That'll scare it," Jessica said. And frankly, camp songs are terrible and would scare away any sane person. Why not an animal? So as we continued down the path, we began to sing, making as much noise as possible. As we drew closer to the bend where we would be closest to the meadow, it happened. Our flashlights, all three of them, somehow went out. Our singing was cut short as pure, primal terror caused us to suck in our breaths. We frantically began trying to turn the flashlights back on, wondering why they all shut off at the same time. Then Jessica said, "What is that?" My body froze. I didn't want to look. Even as Melissa gasped, indicating that she'd seen whatever it was Jessica had seen. Maybe if I didn't look, it wouldn't be real. Maybe I'd wake up back at camp and... I looked. The meadow lay stretched before us, and for the first time that night we could see it. A light slowly stretched from the east side of the field to the west, illuminating an unearthly fog until it encompassed the entire thing. Aliens, I wondered incredulously. I'd specifically taken in every detail of that field that day, and I knew there were no lighting fixtures whatsoever that could pull that off. But even as we watched, a shadow appeared in the light, hovering. At first we thought it was a deer, a buck actually. We could see its horns, but as it moved, it didn't quite move normally. Not like a deer should. It seemed almost like it was gliding. Then as we stared in complete horror, it stood up on two legs. Then as if someone flipped off a light switch, the light was gone and we were in total blackness. Alyssa was sobbing. "Did you see? Did you?" Jessica's scream whispered. I was still staring. My brain was screaming at my body to run, but I couldn't just leave the girls here to deal with whatever that was on their own. Jessica shook me. "Did you see?" "Yeah." I finally managed through a tight throat. I was terrified that we were drawing whatever it was towards us, and with our flashlights out, it was too dark to even see our deaths coming. We need to go now. "Do you think we should scare it off?" Alyssa sounded like she wanted us to tell her this thing behaved like a normal animal, but Jessica and I were certain we were past that point. "No. We need to get back to camp as fast as possible," I hissed, pulling on Jessica's arm. "But what if running makes it attack?" Jessica asked. "Then we speedwalk," and that's what we did. We started speedwalking. None of us bothered to try to get our lights back on. We just needed to get out, but even as we walked, that feeling that something was following us grew with every step, until finally we stopped caring what it would do. We needed to get back to populated camps immediately. Without even talking it over, we broke into a run. I'm not a fast runner, but as I ran, I kept imagining that thing at our heels. I imagined claws, teeth biting into the back of my neck, and though I was the one who was supposed to make sure Melissa got back safely, I ended up outrunning both of them, even as my lungs burned and I felt as if I was breathing in ash. Just before the first populated campground, we saw a shadow appear in the road in front of us. Melissa and Jessica began screaming, but I kept running at it. For one stupid moment, I was ready to fight whoever was in front of us. We were going to get back to camp or die trying, I decided. But as I got closer, I saw they had a flashlight. They were human. In fact, they were from our group. "There you are," they said, looking at us as if we were crazy. We'd stopped in front of them, huffing and puffing. We took so long I was sent to go look for you. There's something in the meadow, I wheezed. Does your flashlight work? They frowned at me and held up their obviously working flashlight. Yeah? Good, good. Ours stopped. We need to get back now. They didn't argue, and as we headed back, Melissa, Jessica, and I each recounted what we'd seen. When we got back to camp, we told our counselors the same thing, yet they didn't believe us. It sounded crazy. It was crazy. And when we were told we had overactive imaginations, I stared at our counselor, dead in the eye, and said, all three of us have the exact same story. We were screaming as we ran back towards populated campgrounds. That doesn't sound like an overactive imagination to me. This didn't change their mind, of course. A few other campers believed us, but after that, we didn't dare go down that road at night. To this day, I'm not completely sure what it was. I know what I saw. I know it was real. There's no logical explanation for what happened. Though I do still go camping, I always make sure to warn those I'm with. We're not alone. There's something out there, and it's watching, waiting for its moment to strike. Story number 3. This story took place about a year back. I was with my Boy Scout troop. We were headed to a remote area in Arizona to go camping. Our troop arrived early in the afternoon, so my friends A and W had plenty of time to set up camp. After we finished, we walked around and explored the campsite. While we walked around, W started being obnoxious. He started breaking branches off trees, kicking shrubs out of the ground, killing bugs for no reason, and basically anything he could do to wreck the area. A and I told him to stop, because we were worried that a leader would see us and punish us. Eventually, A and I got caught in a conversation and stopped hassling W. Little did we know what a mistake we were making. Night fell, and we all went into our tents to go to bed. After talking about girls and video games, we all fell asleep. I was awakened a few hours later by W shaking me. What is it? I asked sluggishly. I heard some noises outside the tent, he told me. You see, W was freaked out by a lot of things, especially at night. I turned over to see that A was awake as well. He woke me up too. Told me. It's probably nothing, I told W. Just go back to sleep. Guys, he took on a serious tone. I'm really freaked out. I've been hearing it for hours. Fine, I muttered as I got out of my sleeping bag. We'll go out, see that it's nothing, and then go to sleep. All right, agreed W. I grabbed my flashlight, and all three of us crawled outside the tent. I turned it on and started scanning the empty desert area behind our tent with it. Nothing to be worried about. I cut myself off. Something caught my eye as I was scanning the desert. 2 yellow eyes stared back at me about 50 feet away. They were less than a foot off the ground, and they were still as a statue, almost like a deer in headlights. I couldn't see the body, just 2 yellow eyes. I kept staring until the eyes darted away from my view. I let out a sigh of relief. See, said A to W. Nothing. Now let us sleep. We made our way back to the tent. As we walked back, I saw some motion out of the corner of my eye. I froze. What is it? Asked A and W almost simultaneously. What is it? I saw a figure in the small bit of light from a dying campfire nearby. Once again, I saw those yellow eyes. A and W traced my eyes to the campfire and saw them too. It's probably just a rabbit or something, said A, reassuring us. Can a rabbit travel 40 feet in a few seconds like that without a sound? Asked a terrified W. Guys, we're all so tired our minds are playing tricks on us. Let's just go back to bed, I finally yelled. I was surprised I didn't wake up the whole camp. I looked back at the dying fire. The figure wasn't even there anymore. See, I said, it's gone now, let's go. I started walking back, but my friends didn't follow. What's wrong? I asked them. They just stood there, seemingly frozen with fear. What's wrong? I asked a little louder as I felt a wave of fear coming over me. Look, demanded A. I turned and saw, standing on the road in the light of the moon, the same figure except now it appeared taller, but it still had those same yellow eyes. Suddenly a shaky yet deep voice came from the darkness. You will pay, it yelled at us. Then it let out a horrifying scream that erupted across the night sky. Not even thinking, we all turned around and sprinted as fast as we could go. We ran and ran, but the thing pursued us wherever we would go. Finally, A yelled out to me in the darkness. It's a tiny little thing. I think we could take it. Yeah, agreed W, who had a new sense of confidence. Okay, I said, but it better work. Unfortunately, while we were talking, we nearly ran into the wall of a nearby bathroom. With nowhere to go, we took a defensive stance. We saw the thing arrive a split second later. The lights from the bathroom flickered out as it walked forward. I tried my flashlight, but it was all in vain. I spammed the button, but it no longer worked. You are coming with me. There was just enough moonlight to see that the figure was outstretching its hand toward W. Why? Stammered W. You have disgraced this land. You will pay. I tried to reason with it, but it ignored me and began walking toward W. He screamed, Please don't take me. Tears streamed down his face. He pleaded more and more. I demanded the thing stopped, but it ignored his and my requests. Then I said, We'll leave. I promise. We'll never come back here. Finally, the creature stopped. It faced me. Come here again. I will kill you. All I remember after that was waking up in our tent. My friends were waking up as well. I asked them about the night before, but they remembered nothing. I was confused. Because of everything that happened, I thought they would remember it. But still to this day, I'm the only one that remembers. I don't know what we encountered, but I've kept my promise and never will go back. Story number 4. Just to start off, this whole story is a true story. It takes place at an Oregonian summer Boy Scout camp, the name of which I don't think I can reveal. It takes place from the perspective of a 14-year-old scout. The first encounter was had on one of my many solo hikes through the campgrounds, which took me off trail in the hunt of an abandoned part of the camp, a chapel that was rumored to have been abandoned the prior year. I had discovered a decrepit trail that was overgrown and looked more like a deer trail than anything else. But after maybe 20 to 30 feet, I found what looked like the rumored chapel, which was only a few worn benches, some trash, and a crumbling fire bowl. As any foolish scout, I ran into the chapel, meaning to find out what happened there, only to feel like I was being watched. In vain I looked around in the grounds around me and saw nothing but the overgrown chapel. But even with this, I felt uneasy and began to leave, in case it was a counselor that I couldn't see. As I rushed out, I looked up to the trees for a final glance. There above me was a large, dark figure, one that looked to be about the size of a full-grown man, leaping through the trees without making anything more than a rustle that sounded like the wind. Upon seeing this, I rushed back to the main trail and found some of my fellow scouts, hoping that they could confirm what I had seen. I met up with my friend, who we will call A for now, who wanted to come along to see the chapel, and did not believe that I had seen anything. We hiked into the chapel to see that one of the benches was newly broken, and there being no signs whatever had done it, not even the cryptid from before. Satisfied that all was well, we went to regroup with the boys of our troop so that we could go back to camp and get ready for lunch. The walk there was very uneventful, and we got ready in time, but before we could leave, we had to grab one of my troop mates who was, for a merit badge, constructing a survival shack behind the camp. This was all fine until we heard something following us. We thought it was just a deer until it started charging through the brush towards our camp, and we realized that it was on 2 legs, not on 4. Everyone in the group ran back to warn the rest of the scouts there. They thought at first we were pulling a prank on them, at least until another scout, friend B, came rushing back, saying someone was walking around his tent. Someone who he thought was us, until he saw all of the boys of our troop were gathered by the campfire already. This sent shock through the scouts, causing many of them to arm themselves with sticks, pocket knives, and rocks to defend against whomever it was in our campsite. We all stood there in fear of what it could be, some thinking it was a bear, others thought it was a man, at least until we looked up and saw it standing on top of a half-dead tree leering down at us. This creature was, as I had said, about the size of a grown man, was covered in brown fur that looked to be short, like a deer or a short-haired dog, and on its head was what looked like the skull of a deer, loosely placed, almost like a helmet. Its arms were long and skinny, its legs were almost impossible to see, but it stood like it was going to kill us all, like it felt no fear at the herd of young boys that were before it. It didn't move for what felt like eternity. We began to think we were seeing things until an adult came back to the camp. And upon hearing this, the creature leaped off of its perch and sprung into the woods, behind it with a grace that sent a shiver down my spine. None of us ever saw that thing again, and no one was to go anywhere without two friends and their knife, a rule that we still loosely hold to this day. I don't know what we saw that day, but I've heard a lot of stories, both from my family, who are versed in Native American culture, and this channel. There are things out here that go without an explanation, things that won't care who you are or how old you are. They just want to know what you taste like. Now, we have come to the end of today's episode, and if you like these stories, then hit the like button, press the notification bell, and subscribe for more spine-tingling content. And we will see you in the next story.